Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
We hope you enjoy listening to this podcast of St. Louis on the Air, brought to you by University College at Washington University, with undergraduate and graduate programs part-time, evening, and online. University College at Washington University, offering world-class education within reach.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh. Today we discuss the role of Missouri's new governor. Mike Parson delivered his first address as governor before a joint session of the state legislature yesterday. Joining me to take a closer look is St. Louis Public Radio political reporter Joe Mannies and State House reporter Marshall Griffin. They join us by phone. Thank you so much, both of you, for being with us. Great to talk to you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Joe, let me begin with you. I read your story this morning, which essentially says that the governor yesterday, during a very short speech, was long on style but short on substance.
Yes, and I think that was probably his aim. His point was to make it clear that it's a new day in Jeff City as far as tone and tenor, but it's not a big change as far as policy or philosophy, as far as how government should work. He is a conservative, and many of his positions are in line with the legislative leaders and with former Governor Eric Greitens as far as certain things on what government should do, low taxes, less regulation, that sort of thing. He does differ from the former governor on education. He is more supportive of public education and already has taken some steps to bolster the State Board of Education and put 2 new members on. He did that this morning. But it's, as I said, it'll be a change in tone, but not in substance.
Marshall, what's the early reaction been? I can only assume that the Republicans are very happy, the Democrats maybe not so much.
Well, I think the Democrats are appreciative of the new tone. That's no secret. But it's also no secret that when Governor Parson briefly touched on policy and talked about the things that the Republican-led legislature was able to accomplish, that Democrats pretty much sat on their hands during that portion of the speech, while the Republicans were giving Parson a standing ovation. So it'll be the same battle over the same things. But perhaps in some ways not as vitriolic, at least when it comes from what's coming from the governor's office.
You seem a little tentative on that. I was under the impression that this was going to be a brand new era because of the Greitens gone and Parson coming in.
Well, we're in the middle of a honeymoon right now, as they say, the honeymoon stage. But eventually, all honeymoons come to an end. I suppose in a marriage, ideally, the honeymoon should never end. But when it comes to political honeymoons, they all do eventually end. Some might question whether there ever actually was a honeymoon with the former governor. But like I say, these people, the Democrats will be able to at least have civil and cordial conversations with Parson, but they're going to be sharp disagreements, and eventually, those battles will flare up.
Joe, you see some storm clouds as well, potentially?
Well, possibly. I thought it was interesting. I talked to State Rep. Clem Smith, who's a Democrat from St. Louis, after the speech last night, and one of his first comments to me was that he appreciated the tone, but he said, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid. Yeah. and he said he saw Parson and Greitens as being the same on ideology, even though they were what he called different packaging. And I think that the Democrats recognize that. In fact, some Democrats have been concerned that Parson will likely be more effective in getting certain things through that they don't want because he will have such better relations with the leaders of the General Assembly. I think one of the most illustrative pictures of last night was taken by our own Carolina Hidalgo, which is on our website now. It shows Parson flanked by the House Speaker Todd Richardson and the Senate leader, Ron Richard, right after the speech, and it's practically, a group hug, at the podium. And you never would see that with Greitens. I mean, those guys stayed. There was a big distance between them and the previous governor, and so I think that does have Democrats concerned a bit. But on the other hand, I think there are many where there is common ground, such as on public education, such on the need to fund the universities, such as some urban issues. I think Parson took a very strong step by already having private meetings with St. Louis Mayor Lyda Crewson and with her counterpart in Kansas City, Sly James, which is something that Greitens never did. So I think Parson is really trying to set the tone of saying my door is open, even if though we may disagree, it's not going to be nasty. I mean, that's sort of his approach.
But Marshall, realistically, how important is tone? I mean, the Republicans dominate the legislature.
They do dominate the legislature, but as we could see with Republican supermajorities in the House and the Senate, and then with the Republican governor on the second floor of the Capitol, there was plenty of conflict, and of course, a lot of that was with the former governor. Striking out a certain tone and wanting everyone to fall in line, and taking exception to when a fellow Republican disagreed or sharply criticized him. So that's the tone. It might be easier to get some things done now with Governor Parson, but I do think that there will still be conflicts, because conflicts always happen. They may not be very nasty conflicts or as nasty, and they may not happen as often, but there will still be conflict.
Well, Joe, of course, this is an election year. How does Parson fit into all of that in terms of people trying to, jockey for position and for some success in November?
Well, actually, his change of the tone politically is smart, because from the public's perspective, I mean, they don't get involved in all this nitty-gritty behind-the-scenes stuff. I mean, the public became aware of all these divisions between Greitens and fellow Republicans because of a few high-profile issues, and then, of course, the stuff about his affair. But if Parson has a more amenable tone, even if his policies are the same, what the public will see is more of a smooth process, government working, and they may not get into the nitty-gritty of whether or not they agree with it. And that, though, can really help the Republicans with the key swing voters. I mean, the Republicans, I've heard this from a number of them, and last week's special election, I think, proved it. They're being killed in the suburbs. I mean, that's one of the reasons they lost a state Senate seat last week by 20 points in suburban Kansas City, and that was a district that had been carried by Trump 2 years ago. Well, it's because these swing voters are very disturbed about what they're seeing. So by having a different tone, by coming across as a pleasant person, even if one disagrees with them, you can still talk to them, it does provide a much better image for the Republicans from the top down going into November. And it also ends all this infighting, between the governor and the legislature, the governor and, let's say, the Attorney General, Josh Hawley, who's running for the U.S. Senate. All that's gone. I mean, they're all trying to be like a happy family. So, I mean, that plays well politically.
Marshall, the Greitens shadow was somewhat over that speech last night, or certain parts of the speech. He didn't name any names, the new governor, that is, but he certainly made it clear that he wants to get beyond some of the things that the former governor stood for.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes back to style and the way that you deliver a message, because Greitens seemed to at least seemed to approach everything the same way as if he were a Navy SEAL going into combat, and that was go on the attack, get behind me and follow me, otherwise you're in the way. He didn't make a whole lot of friends in Jefferson City, and we didn't often see him, try to negotiate positions. So that whole image of Greitens, being on the attack was, something that Parson did a 180 on, and he also, during his speech, he, kind of subtly pointed that out in a few ways, saying, we've seen the worst of politics and we've seen the best of politics, and then there was the line talking about all the different people over the past 200 years who have served in the legislative post, saying, they did not come here, many of them did not come here to make a career out of politics, which seemed to fly in the face of Greitens constantly calling members of the legislature who disagreed with him career politicians.
Joe, how important is this listening tour?
Well, I think, again, it kind of fits in with what we were just talking about. I think it does. I think Parson does want to introduce himself to the public because while he's a very familiar figure in Jefferson City, in the state capital, he's not so familiar outside of the capital, except in his area in southwest Missouri. So I think smartly he wants to, travel around the state. He's going to be in St. Louis Wednesday and meet with different groups or businesses or whatever, shows him out there, shows him reaching out, trying to listen to people, see what their concerns are. Again, this doesn't mean that his policies are going to be any different, but it does present a different, kinder, gentler image, whether or not the policies are that way. But it's smart. I mean, politically, it's smart.
Marshall, as time winds down, just one final question about the prospect of finding a way to have a lieutenant governor now that vacancy exists. They're still talking about that, and is there anything you see that indicates they might come up with a way to fill that spot?
Well, right now it's only talk and speculation, but Governor Parson late last week did lay open the possibility of calling a special session. He said he would be open to that when he was asked about it by some reporters. A special session to change state law so that there would be a clear succession plan for filling the lieutenant governor's vacancy, whether that would take the form of giving the governor the authority to appoint someone to fill a vacancy in that office, or to make it easier to have a special election. Those details aren't known yet. There was actually two different pieces of legislation that would have fixed that problem during the regular session, but they both died during the final week, and I think one died actually within the final hour of the 2018 session. So it didn't get solved this year when it could have been. There were two chances to do that.
We have to take a break and say goodbye to you guys. But before I do that, we have a caller who has a question that maybe you can help him with. Let's do that if we can do it quickly. Tom in St. Louis, go ahead, but make it quick, please.
Don, from what I hear, it sounds like one place where the new governor might be different from Greitens is education. He seems close to educators and less interested in like charter schools and that sort of thing than Greitens. Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yes, he's very much a supporter of public education. He's a man from rural Missouri, and in rural Missouri, the public school districts are very popular. Frankly, because in many cases that's all they have. There's not charter schools out there. Most of the charter schools are in urban or suburban areas. And so Parson is very well aware of some of the issues and the importance of public education in rural Missouri. So that's one of the reasons why he wants to get things straightened up really quick on the state Board of Education, because he's been hearing from these rural superintendents for some time. So that was one of his first things on his agenda, and his appointments this morning, I think, are aimed at sending a message that he's trying to deliver.
Marshall, if you have something to add it. Otherwise, we'll say goodbye.
Well, just that it'll be interesting to see what happens on Thursday when the State Board of Education does finally hold a legally required meeting with enough voting members. So I look to see for a change in direction as far as more support for the State Board of Education and its mission.
All right. Well, thanks to both of you, reporters Joe Mannies and Marshall Griffin. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.